Hi guys, a while back on Instagram and on YouTube I asked you for your questions that you might like to ask me for a Q&A video. I haven't done many of these before. I've kind of included Q&A questions in other videos, but I don't think I've ever really done one like this. So we'll see how it works, and if it goes well then I'm definitely up for filming more Q&A videos in the future. So I've got lots of questions to get through. Thank you to everybody who sent one in. If I didn't get to your question then I'm probably saving it to include in an entire video on that subject, or some I just couldn't fit in or squish together to go alongside other questions. So I've got my questions on my laptop which I will be reading from, and the first one is, would you rather own a bookshop or a library? This is a really difficult question because I suppose you then need to distinguish between the jobs that a bookshop and a library hold. I think my answer would probably be a bookshop because in writing my book, The Paper and Heart Society, I created a fictional bookshop called Wolf and Wild, named after Virginia Woolf and Oscar Wilde, because I thought that would be a great name for a bookshop. And in creating that in my book, I kind of designed my ideal bookshop, which is this multi-storied thing with books absolutely everywhere you can look, and a cafe on the side which is Alice in Wonderland themed. So in my book I kind of designed my ideal bookshop, but maybe one day in many years time, but I think a bookshop for me would be my answer. The next question is, what are your career aspirations? So at the moment I am an author. That's my job full time. I was offered a 3-book deal a few years ago, so my first book came out last year, my second book comes out in May, and then my third book comes out next year, which I'm currently working on. But I don't think I always want to be an author full time. Being an author and writing is something that you can do part-time or alongside a full-time job even. I have lots of friends who do so. So I don't think I always want to be an author, and I still feel like I'm quite young. So I'm enjoying being an author at the moment, but I don't necessarily think it's what I'll always do. At the moment, and the thing that I'm really working towards, is that I would love to work in the museums and heritage sector. So since I started working alongside the Bronte Parsonage Museum a few years ago and got to see kind of the inner workings of how museums and heritage systems work, I kind of thought, you know what? This is what I want to be doing for the rest of my life. I love it so much. So I am working towards that at the moment. Before all of this virus came along and the whole world changed, I was making active steps to starting working in that kind of environment, so getting lots of experience. So I was going to volunteer for the National Trust as well as my local museum, which is still something that I'm hoping to do, and is definitely a door that's still open once things hopefully get going again, but I'd love to do that. So I don't know precisely because I haven't got the experience yet, but I'd probably like to do curatorship or even something in publicity and marketing, but I would like to do something in the museums and heritage sector because I love it so much. It's what I'm extremely passionate about, and I think that the sector can offer so much to so many people, so it is something that I absolutely adore. So hopefully one day it's something that I will be doing. The next question is, what classics took you the longest to read? I tend to read classics over a long period of time anyway, so I'm currently reading Anna Karenina and have been for the past 8 months or so. I would say the author who takes me the longest to read, it might be surprising to you, but the author who takes me the longest to read is Jane Austen. I have not read many of her books very quickly, so it took me about 6 months to finish Northanger Abbey. I'm still reading Sense and Sensibility. It took me about 8 or 9 months I think to finish Mansfield Park. It just takes me ages to read her books. I don't tend to read them all in one go. I did that with Persuasion because it's shorter, and Pride and Prejudice because it's my first, but Jane Austen is probably the author who takes me the longest to read, and it still continues to surprise me. I don't know why, just something about her writing maybe that just takes me longer to process. I love her books, she just takes me ages. This is a very difficult question. It is, you can only read one book for the rest of your life. What would you choose? I don't know is the answer. What would I want to read for the rest of my life? One book. I really don't know. I kind of want to say something like Jane Eyre. So Shirley is my favourite Bronte book, followed by Wuthering Heights, but Jane Eyre for me is a book that every time I read it, I love it more and more. I think that Jane Eyre is one of the best books written in the English language. I think that it is phenomenal because there is so much behind it in every single word, so many allusions, so many tropes and kind of ideas that Charlotte draws on and kind of spins them in her own way. So I think my answer might be Jane Eyre, which surprises me because there are so many other books that I could choose, but I seem to get something out of it different every time, so I think that Jane Eyre would be my choice. I'd be interested to know what you would choose for this. Next question is, did you enjoy being read to as a child? And the answer is yes. Some people kind of find reading later on in life, but I've always been a bookworm, like always loved books and loved being read to. My mum would read a bedtime story to me every night and she'd be half asleep and I would be sat there going, please can you read me more? I would never be asleep. And we used to go to the library once a week and we'd get the maximum number of books out, which was 12 at the time, and spend an afternoon reading them. And I just have such fond memories of reading as a child and growing up reading as well. I mean, I started my blog when I was 12, which was really when I became super obsessed with books and is why I'm doing what I do today. And I suppose at the time I didn't feel like I was still a child, but I was. And so that for me is something I've been doing ever since I was a child, kind of doing this, doing videos and blog posts and whatever. So reading is always something that I've enjoyed, and I'm so lucky that I've had people around me to nurture that love. I do consider myself very lucky that I have had that, and reading is something that if I had children I would pass on to them and hope that they would enjoy too, because I think you can get so much out of books, and if I didn't read I wouldn't be the person I am today. The next question is one that I really love and it gave me a lot of food for thought. It is, what are your thoughts on the disparity between the books you read/love and the books you write? And this is such an interesting question because as a reader I read all these amazing books, like I just talked about Jane Eyre being one of the best books in the English language. So I'm reading books like that all the time, like Jane Eyre, you know, I might read Charles Dickens, I might read all these kind of staple books that are some of the best books ever written. And then when it comes to sit down at my laptop and write, obviously I'm not producing writing of that level, and it can be incredibly difficult, and I do doubt myself as a writer sometimes because I think I compare myself a lot to other authors or other authors from the past. I think you're bound to because I read a lot, and as I read a lot I then go back to writing and think, oh, this quality is not the same. But I'm trying not to concern myself with that because each author has an individual voice, which might depend on the novel you're writing or whatever it is you're writing. Each author has their own style, and that's going to be different depending on your influences and what you enjoy reading and how you write and how you've been taught. But also I feel like for me, I have to focus on where I am right now in my life and in my career. So I'm literally 20 years old, and at my age Emily Bronte was still writing her juvenilia, Charlotte was still writing her juvenilia, Charles Dickens, you know, whatever. So they weren't at their best at this age. I'm not comparing myself to them because I don't think I'm ever going to be as good as any of them as a writer. Like I wouldn't want to be because they're so good. But you have to kind of remind yourself that everybody started somewhere, and so when I'm writing I try to remind myself that every time I write, every time I finish a book or finish a chapter even, I'm making myself a better writer. So every time you write you have to keep doing it because that's how you improve. You learn how to not just to write but to how to tell that story effectively. There are things I look back on my first book now and think, why did I do it like that? Even on my second book I think, I wish I'd done that differently. And as I'm writing my third book I can see all the mistakes I made in previous books kind of coming together and being able to improve on them. So I definitely feel now that I've got more books under my belt that I'm becoming a better writer, and I think that when I try to write a different project next I will take everything I've learned and kind of the experience of that. So there is a huge disparity between the books I read and the books I write, but I'm actually perfectly okay with that, even though sometimes that doubt can creep in. Another writing related question, and this one one says, I was wondering if you had any wish to write other genres such as maybe historical fiction set in Victorian times or a non-fiction book on that era. And there are two answers to this question. The first one is yes, and the second one is no, not quite at the moment. So the point that I'm at the moment is that I am writing my third book, which is contracted. It's the third book in a series, so that's what I've got to focus on. So that's my main priority. It is a contemporary book for teenagers, so probably about 12 plus. So that's what I'm working on. But at the same time, what goes on in my brain is that I might be writing one book, but I'll be thinking about lots of others. There are lots of books in my brain in development. So at the moment, at the forefront of my mind is an idea that I'd like to develop that is set at the beginning of the Edwardian period. It would probably be a book for older teenagers, and I think that there would be fantasy elements to it too. There are lots of things that I've been playing around with, and it's actually based on an idea that I had pitched to my agent for children. So it was a children's fantasy historical book that I had pitched, and I don't think we could quite not agree, we could agree, but there was a lot of development still to be done on it. So I've gone away and I've kind of thought of all the different ways that I could develop that and change it so that it will kind of fit with our kind of vision. So I'm kind of mixing lots of ideas together at the moment. So I've also got ideas in the back of my brain for 2 Victorian novels for adults, which I'd love to write one day. I have a Victorian, I suppose Victorian novel for children that I think I might like to write, but I've kind of got to do the research to see how the actual historical facts fit into the idea that I've got, and if I can kind of mould the history around the idea. I also have ideas for other teenage books, kind of contemporary teenage books that I probably will write in the future, but nobody really knows where their writing career is going to take them or how that's going to be shaped. So for me, what I like to do is have as many ideas as possible that I can draw on at any time. But I definitely would love to write historical fiction one day. That's probably my greatest love and what I'd love to write, but it hasn't been quite the right time to write it yet, and that's also fine with me. But it's definitely something that I will want to do at some point because it's my greatest love, it's what I love writing the most, so I can definitely see myself going off in that direction in the future. And I'd also never say no to non-fiction because I've got ideas for all kinds of non-fiction too. My head It's just full of book ideas and I don't know when I'm going to get to write them all, if I'll ever get to write them all, but I'm going to try at some point. I've just got to find the time. Next question is, which audiobooks of classics do you recommend? So I have an Audible subscription which I have credits for each month, and I don't actually listen to audiobooks of classics. What I like listening to is radio plays, which I find are a really economical way of listening to audiobooks, because usually there are bind up editions of sometimes all of an author's books in radio form. For example, I love Rachel Joyce's adaptations of the Bronte novels, and they are basically like reading the books, except for me, my brain focuses on radio plays better than it does audiobooks, and I find that I can listen to them better. So I love those, the Bronte ones. There are also Jane Austen ones. I listen to Charles Dickens, Vanity Fair. I've got things like The Secret Garden. So I tend to go towards BBC radio plays instead, and I don't think you can go wrong with any of them. I've also been listening to the Chronicles of Narnia series. I've read, or listened to, not read, the first one and really love that. So I've got The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe to listen to next, which is really cool. So I don't have any audiobook recommendations, but I can definitely recommend the BBC audio radio plays because they are amazing. I love all the sound effects, I love the actors they bring in, everything about it is brilliant, and I think they adapt them really well too. If you ever got the chance to meet and have a little chat with any of the classics writers belonging to any of the ages, who would you like to meet? This is something that people ask me a lot, like if you could meet the Brontes, would you? And my answer is probably no. I know that sounds weird because they're my favourite authors, but would I want to meet them? Probably not, because I'd be scared that they wouldn't like me. That's probably a really weird fear to have. But I just feel like there's a line from Virginia Woolf's A Room of One's Own, and kind of a section where she talks about authors like Shakespeare and Jane Austen, how the fact that you don't know anything about them makes people like their books more. When somebody is a blank canvas, you can put all of your kind of feelings and images on them, but once you know them and once you can see them, you might think, well, I don't like them, like why are they talking about that like that, or I don't agree with that. And so I don't know if I'd want to meet anyone. My favourite story from Virginia Woolf, another Virginia Woolf story, totally coincidentally, is when Virginia Woolf met Thomas Hardy, and Thomas Hardy had worked with Virginia Woolf's father, so there was a family connection there, but she went to visit him in older age and wanted to talk about his books with him, but he just wanted to talk about the dog, and he had a room full of books that he had to sign for people, and he just was not bothered about talking about his writing whatsoever. He was basically a normal man. So I kind of would like to meet Thomas Hardy if I could, just have kind of normal conversations with him. But it's my favourite Virginia Woolf story that is in her diaries. And I love the image of Thomas Hardy being this totally down-to-earth, normal man who just wants to talk about his dog. He doesn't want to talk about anything else, just his dog. And I can have that chat with Thomas Hardy. So maybe Thomas Hardy would be my answer, or Shakespeare, come on. Shakespeare I think would be good as well. Do you ever think you'll run out of books that you like? This is a genuine fear of mine because I've read, for example, most of Eva Ibbetson's books now. I am working my way through all of Thomas Hardy's books. I have one Bronte book left to read. What am I going to do afterwards is the question that I asked myself. You can reread them, but you'll never get the experience of reading that book for the first time ever again. So this is a genuine fear of mine, but I don't think I'll ever run out of books completely because you always discover new authors. And so one of the things I'm challenging myself to do at the moment is to find authors that nobody else is really talking about. So I've been reading lots of Welsh women's classics. So I've been reading Alan Rain, who I'm just loving completely. So once I've read all of her books, there might be another author that I then move on to. Or there could be, you know, I could read all of Thomas Hardy's books, but then I find one of his contemporaries to read who was writing similar stuff. So I just feel like maybe, yes, I might read everything from that author, but I probably need to frame it in the way of each book I read will lead me to reading another book that I could love equally. So this has tapped into a big fear of mine, this question, but I don't think I'll ever run out completely. There'll always be more books and always be more authors writing more books. Next question, are you planning to study at university later in life? So you may have seen that, I think last year, maybe even the year before, I filmed a video where I talked about my decision not to go to university. It's something that most people I knew had done, had gone to university after they'd left college or sixth form or whatever, and that was something that I decided not to do. I didn't think it was the right time. I'd already started working as an author, so I didn't really feel like I had to do that to do my job, but it is actually something that I will be talking about quite a lot in the future because I have decided that yes, I am going to be starting a university degree. Hopefully in the autumn. I don't really know what will happen in the next few months. I don't think anyone does, but my hope is that in the autumn I will be starting a university degree in history. I thought a lot about it. I really wanted to take the time to think carefully about what I wanted to do. If I'd gone to university originally, I probably would have studied English literature because that was kind of the only thing that was open to me. But I found it very stressful when it came to applying originally, and I just decided that I was going to take that off the table completely. But it's been 2 years now and I think I've come a long way in that time. I have really thought about it very carefully and I wanted that decision to be something that I had full faith in because I knew that I was going to be doing this and that I needed to be committed to it. So I have come to the decision that I will be studying a university degree in history and I am so excited. It's the one thing that I cannot wait for at the moment. I genuinely am counting down the days because I cannot wait to get started, and I think it's going to complement everything else I do really well. So I won't go into any more detail at the moment because it's not completely confirmed, but that is the plan and I am so excited. I think it is completely the right time and I just can't wait. So I'll talk about that more as it comes closer and as I can talk a bit more once things are confirmed. But yes, that is the plan. The final question that I am going to answer is, you spoke of wanting to read more French literature. Do you want to learn the French language as well, or any other language? So I used to actually film videos in French because I was a French nerd. I loved studying French at school and wanted to be fluent one day, but then when I left school and dropped doing French, my French got very rusty, and I've tried to pick it up again, but my brain doesn't quite work like that, because I then started learning Norwegian and found it was so intuitive that it kind of kicked every other language out of my brain. So I love languages so much. I find I've got a brain for languages, so I can remember things really well, and I like kind of the grammar and kind of technical side of learning languages, which I think really works in my favour. I'm pleased that my brain works that way, and I kind of get obsessed when I start learning a language, so I want to keep doing it, and so have to rein that in slightly, because otherwise I would never get any other work done. I don't know if I'd ever pick French up again in my life. Probably, like, I'd love to one day get to the point where I used to be, but I think for now, like, I'm loving learning Norwegian. I watch a lot of Norwegian TV, so that's something that I just kind of pick up really easily and is something that I really like. I kind of like to learn Welsh at some point because I'm reading a lot of Welsh literature at the moment, and it's also something that my grandmother would have absolutely loved, so I'd like to do it for her. And I have heard Welsh growing up. I've got family members who are fluent, so that would mean a lot to me. So maybe that should be my next challenge. But in terms of languages, I feel like at the moment my learning tends to focus on Norwegian, and maybe in the future I'll add Welsh to that. So those were the questions for my Q&A. I hope you liked my answers, and if you liked this then do let me know, because I will do another one in the future if you would like to. I'm also hoping to do an Instagram live where you'll be able to ask me live questions at some point in the next few weeks, and I also sporadically do Q&As on Instagram, so if you're not following me at Lucy the Reader, that's probably the best place to look. So I hope you enjoyed watching this video, and I will see you guys soon. Happy reading!